Well, greetings. Pastor Eric here, greeting you from our church nursery with a Sunday preview for Sunday, February 12th. And we have two more times in the Old Testament. We're talking about Esther on Sunday, chapter 20 in the story. And then the next week, we're going to talk about the return to Jerusalem from Babylon, from the deportation of the Jews from the exile. They returned to Jerusalem in 3 waves. So you'll hear more about that next Sunday, the 19th, along with the adult forum, and there's more to the story about Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the temple. Fascinating story. So chapter 20 today, we're on Esther, and like Daniel, the story of Esther has intrigue and conflict involved as the Jewish people live in foreign parts in Babylon. One of the fascinating things about the book of Esther is that it's the only book in the Bible that doesn't mention God specifically. It's fascinating. God is not even mentioned in the book of Esther. That's why Martin Luther didn't like it. Martin Luther wouldn't have had the book of Esther included in the Bible. On the other hand, if you learn, as we learn the story of Esther, the hand of God was all over the story of Esther. The story begins with King Xerxes of Persia, hosting a huge party in which his queen, Vashti, refused to come out and show herself off. And so she left, and all of a sudden, King Xerxes was left without a queen to take care of him. So they had this beauty pageant from the 126 provinces in the area, and a Jewish woman named Esther was encouraged by her cousin Mordecai or her uncle Mordecai to enter into the contest. Even though she was Jewish, she wasn't supposed to tell anybody that she was Jewish, but she was living in Persia, in Babylon, and Mordecai encouraged her to enter into the pageant. Well, of course, she won because she was beautiful and lots of other things going for her, and became the queen of Xerxes, but he didn't know she was Jewish. So soon after that, Mordecai learned of a plot to kill the king. He passed it on to Esther. The plot was foiled, and Mordecai became a little bit in service of the king. But shortly after that, the villain comes in, the villain of the story. Xerxes' right-hand man, Haman, who was a bad guy, wanted everyone to kneel down to the king, and since Mordecai wouldn't do that, Haman was outraged, and he said that Xerxes, the bad king, should have all the Jews in the area put to death because Mordecai, the good uncle, wouldn't bow down to the bad king who was married to Queen Esther. So the plot thickens. Mordecai sent a letter to Esther saying, "Go to the king and ask for mercy for the Jewish people." The problem was that would have put Esther in peril, because going and questioning the king, asking him to do something different than what he'd already decided to do, could cause her to be thrown out and maybe even put to death. And the famous words that Mordecai says to Esther are, "Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just a time as this." For just a time as this, when that moment made all the difference in Esther's world and in the world of the Jews, because she went to the king, saved them from annihilation, and because of that, once a year the Jewish people gather and they read the letter of Esther. And it's funny, we'll be doing this a little bit on Sunday morning in church here, though not in the recording. We'll be cheering for Esther when her picture comes up. We'll be jeering for Xerxes, the bad king. We'll be clapping for Mordecai, who is the good uncle, and we'll be hissing for Haman, the bad actor who wanted to have all the Jews killed. That's kind of what they did in the table celebrations once a year on the festival of Purim, where they would read the letter of Esther, the book of Esther, the 10 chapters, and they would be kind of a raucous affair, and they would make all these noises, kind of animate the story as it's read. So as you read through the story, just think of Esther willing to risk her life for her people. Think of risks maybe you've taken in the past. Maybe not to save people, but risks that you went out on a limb to stand up for what was right in whatever situation it was, like Esther did. How did that challenge you? How did the outcome work, and how did that make you feel when you were done with that? And as you hear the story of Esther on Sunday, or as you read through it, even though God is not mentioned, can you think of how God almost works behind the scenes in Esther? One of the things that I'm saying on Sunday in a sermon is that we generally kind of don't look for God so much now. We just kind of think things are coincidences, just kind of happens. Good things happen. And instead of thanking God for it, we just think it was a coincidence that something happened. What I'm going to suggest in the sermon is that what if we think of a coincidence that had a good outcome? Instead of just a coincidence, what if we think about that coincidence as a miracle for which God decides that God doesn't want credit? What if a coincidence is a miracle for which God does not claim credit? Maybe we could see things differently, because the hand of God, the fingerprint of God, is all over the book of Esther, just like the fingerprint of God is all over our lives. But even though God isn't mentioned in Esther, we can read the story and see God working behind the scenes. And my hope is we can extrapolate that into our experience today and see and recognize that God is behind the scenes in our lives, directing, guiding, and blessing us. So enjoy your reading. Come to church on Sunday morning or listen online, and I look forward to talking with you again. Until then, you take care. Bye-bye.